Tom Gualtieri.
And I'm David Sisco.
Welcome to Series 2 of Draw the Circle Wide, which explores the need for more equity in the theater.
In each episode, we interview a gifted Broadway performer, having in-depth conversations about their life and their work as an artist, and what needs to change in the industry. Then we craft a song just for them based on their interview.
As our industry continues to have long overdue conversations about race, equity, and inclusion, we want to use this series to celebrate performers who come from communities that have been underrepresented in the theater and create work for these artists by listening to their voices.
Everybody hungry, everybody tired, everybody slain for the sweat of it.
In this episode, we speak with legendary actor André De Shields, whose Broadway credits include The Wiz, Ain't Misbehavin', The Full Monty, among other things, and Hadestown, which earned him the Outer Critics Circle, Drama Desk, and Tony Awards for Best Featured Actor in a Musical. André's TV projects include Ratatouille, the TikTok musical, John Mulaney and the Sack Lunch Bunch, and Katie Keene. In a career spanning 52 years, André has distinguished himself as an unparalleled actor, director, and educator. He was incredibly generous in sharing with us, and we, frankly, never wanted the conversation to end. You're in for a real treat, folks. We give you André De Shields.
Your Tony speech is iconic. People are still quoting it, and it's great life advice for anyone. But what I want to know is, you said that you should surround yourself with people whose eyes light up when they see you coming.
Yes.
I want to know who makes your eyes light up.
And I'd love to answer that question, but before I do,
Yeah.
I simply want to make sure that you, and through you, everyone who witnesses this interview understands that when I delivered my Tony speech, I was not giving advice.
No.
I was taking a cue from what is now history, 9/11, but out of that we learned that if you see something, say something. Mm-hmm. I believe if you know something, share something. So when I accepted the Tony, I had prepared this little wisdom bomb that I thought if I were fortunate enough to get the statuette, I would drop it on not only the audience in Radio City Music Hall, but how many opportunities am I going to get to speak to millions of people? I could work on Broadway for the rest of my life and not get that kind of audience. So it's not advice, it's what I know from experience, and I want to share it with you. Surround yourself with people whose eyes light up when they see you coming.
Yeah.
I have an extended tribe of people around the world who I have collected from my childhood in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. I even have a group of gentlemen with whom I attended high school with, who are still in my family, and now their children are in my family. Mm. People that I met in my first professional show, Hair, 1969, during the Summers of Love. Mm-hmm. People that I met as an undergraduate in college, and just individuals I've met living 74 Earth years. Mm-hmm. They haven't all been walking the same journey that I have. Sometimes the journeys intersect. Sometimes the journeys are obviously detours away from each other. But then there are journeys that land on what I'd like to call a crossroads. And crossroads are important occurrences in people's lives. It's at the crossroads that the oracle, whatever you consider the oracle to be, speaks to you. Those people you meet at the crossroads are going to be those people that you're going to encounter again in your life, repeatedly, maybe occasionally, perhaps frequently. But these are the people who are going to pop up in your journey. These are the people who allow you to look into their soul through these two eyes. And then they look back at you with this eye.
Mm.
This is the eye of intuition.
Mm.
And when people communicate to you through their eye of intuition, what they are professing for you is love. Not erotic love, not even platonic love, not heroic love, but spiritual love. And you are guaranteed that when you meet these people on your journey again, these eyes will be bright with light, and this eye will be open with intuition. One of the reasons why I love essaying the role of Hermes is that as a storyteller, as an ancient of the ancients, as an archetype who is eternal, one of my responsibilities is to offer a catharsis to the people who have come to the oracle, and those are our audience members. And more often than not, if their eyes are open wide, 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 they're overcome with emotion, and they well up with tears. They're not tears of regret necessarily. They're not tears of joy necessarily. They're tears of release, because each of us carries so much in the core of our existence. And because we're constantly dealing with the humdrum necessities of life 24 hours a day, we hardly ever get a time to exhale. We're constantly inhaling, and then that becomes weight. So it is, do you know the term griot?
No, I don't think
Griot. It's a term that we borrow from Francophone West Africa.
Okay.
The griot is a walking library. The griot is the individual who keeps the oral history of the individual, of the family, of the community, of the nation, of the tribe, of the country, of the world, of the cosmos. And that griot always travels with a protege to whom the knowledge is being constantly passed, so that when the griot transitions into the world of the spirit, there's some air in the world of the tangible to continue keeping the faith, to continue the oral history. And that's who Hermes is. The dropping of the wisdom bomb, it was an explosion of love. You know, I use the term bomb simply to mean that everything came out of that little seed. just like the universe, just like the cosmos. That was Sunday, June 9th. Tuesday, which was the next time we did a performance of Hadestown, I'm doing my monstrously slow walk just outside of the bike lane to the theater. And I'm going east on 47th Street to turn north on 8th Avenue to arrive at 48th Street, which is where the theater is. And as I'm crossing, there's a group of young people crossing against me. And I see they're pointing and their jaws are dropping and that sort of thing. So I sort of look over my shoulder. What are they gobsmacked about? And one of them says, "Mr. Hermes!" So I gesticulated, right? And they surrounded me. And the young man who had pointed me out was wearing a t-shirt with my Tony speech printed on it. And that at that moment, I understood what viral meant, because it had only been 24 hours, right? It's also that moment that I learned in my travels, whether it be from my home to the theater or beyond that everyday journey, I needed to add a buffer of time, because whenever someone wanted to share something with me, I could not say, "Oh no, I don't have time." I could not say, "I'm not interested." I had to say, because I had opened that door, I'd said, "Come in."
Mm-hmm.
I had to have enough time to involve myself in the engagement and still know that I could get to my destination in a timely fashion.
Sure.
So ultimately, it took me 45 minutes to walk from 10th Avenue and 43rd to 8th Avenue and 48th.
But the griot has to pass his knowledge along, doesn't he?
Yeah, and receive the knowledge, because those young people taught me in that moment, taught the griot. Yeah.
You are the ninth of 11 children.
11, yeah.
And grew up in Baltimore,
Yeah.
Which you've mentioned. And we would love to have you, if you feel comfortable, share a story about your growing up that feels like it's enigmatic of your experience growing up, where you either felt part of the community or disconnected from your community.
Growing up in Baltimore, I was a target for any number of reasons, not the least of which was my sexuality. But in other situations, I learned that I was a target because I was perceived as being arrogant, full of myself. And hey, I get it, right? However, as a Black man, arrogance is a tool to put it in a vernacular that everyone can understand, to climb the ladder of success. I was one of those students who was studious. I was that little Black boy who, when the teacher said, "Do you know the answer to this?" my hand would go up immediately. right? That got me the reputation of, oh, Andre thinks he's cute. He thinks he knows everything. It was not cool as a young Black boy to know anything. That still breaks my heart. Let's fast forward to high school. By then, I realized that if I did not get out of Baltimore, I could expect to live maybe to 25. Because otherwise, I was going to be a statistic of police brutality or of drug brutality or of something that would be described as brutality. And I focus on education. That's been my beacon all through my life. If I want to change my situation, if I know that A is only going to get me B, and what I'm after is C, then I have to approach it from a different angle, an oblique angle, an angle that's different from what is offered in this claustrophobic inner city, born to lose culture. So I set my eyes on Baltimore City College, which is a preparatory school. It was overwhelmingly white. And at that time, the diversity was represented by the Jewish people who attended. It was an all-male school. You had to have studied a classical language to get in. You had to pass an exam. And I had to take 2 buses out of my neighborhood to get there. What I learned when I started attending Baltimore City College was I was now one of the dullest knives in the drawer. I was a genius in my classroom in the inner city school. But among this group of people who did not even know what it meant to be impoverished or to use a secondhand textbook, who took excellence for granted, I felt at the lowest of the low I'd ever experienced in my young life. I felt dumb. I felt unprepared. I felt inadequate. I felt insufficient. I thought, how did I ever pass the test to get here? When I was growing up, I was taught everything you do, everything you say, how you look, how you behave, you are representing your race. And there I was in high school, one of the few raisins in the rice pudding, failing my race. I felt low. I was nowhere near the finishing line. It did change ultimately, obviously, but that's the lowest I ever felt, and I felt disconnected from my community because when I would return to my neighborhood on those 2 buses that I had to take to get there, I felt I had failed my neighborhood. Although they were looking at me like a rarity. Oh, he goes to that white school. He has to go through the white neighborhood to get his education. And it's something that I've carried with me to this very moment, which also relates to the wisdom bomb that I dropped during my Tony speech. I think you heard that one of the first things I said was to call out to Baltimore and say, remember the vow I made that someday I was going to achieve something that would make you proud to say, that's the native son of Baltimore. This is the Friday after the Tony Awards. My telephone rings, I answer it. This is Andre. There's a bit of silence, and then this gruff voice says, everybody's talking about you in Baltimore. Why? So I'm thinking, this is someone putting me on. This is a prank. So I say, well, it could be because I just won the Tony Award. And I made a shout out to Baltimore on television. And his response was, yeah, that's right. You're that guy. And I say, excuse me, but who are you? He says, and he identifies himself. I'm the mayor of Baltimore, right? And I go, oh yeah? He says, yeah. And I want to thank you for that shout out. And we want to give you the key to the city. I said, okay. So I applied to the powers that be. I said, this is what's happening. I need to be in Baltimore because when I accepted the Tony, I was also planting the seed of a social contract with the city who made me what I am and that I'm representing on that stage. And everyone cooperated, and they gave me the key to the city, and it was a marvelous, marvelous day. In 1988, my life partner of 17 years was diagnosed with AIDS-related lymphoma. And for the last 4 years of his life, I became his nurse. And we were cautioned by his primary care provider that if his temperature ever reaches 104 degrees, you must bring him to the emergency room. And we understood that. There came a time when his temperature reached 105. Yeah, my eyebrows went up too, because that means the brain is boiling.
Yeah.
And I reminded him of the agreement we had made. And I said, Chico, what do you want to do? And he said to me, I want to die in your arms. I said, okay. When it came to the point where it was necessary to take him to the emergency room, I slept. It took a while before he got a bed, but when he did get a bed, he was in a room by himself, which I thought, okay, this is perfect because we need to be alone with each other. But it was curiously austere. There was nothing else in the room but the bed. And I wasn't going to leave him there alone. So I slept on the floor that night so that I could wake up with him the next morning. Sure, it was obviously that he wasn't going to live too long. And as I was working different colleagues of mine would take turns sitting in the room with him. There came a time when a friend of ours was sitting with him, and she called me at home from work, and she said, "Andre, I think you need to be here." So I arrived at the hospital, and she said to me, I think he's going. So I said, "Well, thank you very much, and thank you for sitting with him." And I held him very close to me because I could hardly hear him. And I said, "Chico, are you all right?" He said, "Yeah, I'm all right." So he wasn't going yet. So I asked my friend if she would stay with him for a little while longer. We were living on 56th Street between 9th and 10th at that time, and he was in Roosevelt Hospital, which is what it was called then, which is on 58th Street on Amsterdam. So I went home, and we still had Polaroid cameras at the time. So I went home and got my Polaroid camera and went back to the hospital and said to my friend, I said, "I'm going to get in the bed with Chico, and I'm going to hold him, and I want you to take a photograph of us." And she said, "Okay." And of course, she's sad through all of this. She did it, and then she left. And then I spent the rest of the night with Chico until I had to go to work the next day. There's a gentleman, his name is Jared McAllister, who writes a cultural column for the New York Post. He's a friend of mine. He had married a friend of mine, which is how I got to know him. And I explained this very story to him, that my lovely Chico had said he wanted to die in my arms. And he intuited exactly what I was thinking. So he took the photograph, the Polaroid photograph that I had my friend take. And he went to, it isn't there any longer, but he went to some store in Times Square that printed newspaper headlines. And he had printed for me the size of a newspaper with the New York Post on it. Chico Casinoir dies in the arms of his lover, André De Shields. I went to the hospital and I showed him the headlines, and this beatific smile just consumed his entire face. And that night, after we had the memorial at La Mama, which was my initial artistic home here, I went back to the hospital because he could not attend the memorial, but all of the people who loved him did. I went back to the hospital, and the nurse was there, and she said, in the very same words that my friend had, she said, "I think he's going." And I said, "Well, may I sit with him for a while?" And she said yes. She excused herself from the room. I got back in the bed with him, and he died in my arms. I felt so fucking powerful that I could have delivered his wish, his dying wish, and that he could have seen it before it actually happened. I thought, this is the best thing I have ever done in my life. And it's not so much that I stuck my chest out, but it just filled me with a potent kind of energy, because then I had to go through those other consequences now that he had died. I felt powerful, a kind of power that helped me to get on with my life, and a kind of power that still comforts me, because one never stops mourning when one says goodbye to a loved one, but a power that comforts me to know that I can still communicate with him, because of how we attended to his last wish.
So I'm about 3/4 of the way through editing, doing the first pass of Andre's video.
Andre's.
It's
a lot, but it's all so interesting. He's so interesting.
It's so good. I mean, it's church. It is because, and the thing that I want us to be mindful of is that, you know, he is meticulous, as he says, about how he chooses his words.
Right.
And one of the things that is so beautiful about watching him talk is his thought process. So there are moments in this first pass that you're going to see that there are like 15, 20 seconds where he doesn't say anything.
Right.
And it doesn't matter because I am following his thought process.
Yeah.
And I want to honor him in not, you know, I don't, you know, we try to make sure that these episodes are, you know,
compact and
informative.
We take the dead space out.
Yeah,
right.
But
that we take the dead space out. But Andre,
it's
like,
not
when
dead
you're
space.
Watching him think, right? It's not dead space.
It's not dead
right?
space. No.
Yeah.
So it's just something that I want us to, you know, we're both kind of on the same page, obviously, about thinking of, because it's obviously it's going to be a 2 arc. I mean, it's going to be a 2 episode arc because there's so much there.